Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But you know, KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast. Well, let me turn to my guest, who is with us this morning, as I mentioned, from the Central Consolidated School District. Superintendent Daniel Benavidez is on the program this morning. Superintendent, good morning. It's good to have you back with us. Thank you for joining me.
Likewise. Good morning, Scott.
Good to see you. And since last we spoke, maybe you can give us a bit of an update on how things are going for your students and staff and teachers in the Central School District. You are still operating under this hybrid model, correct?
Except for we were under that model up until about 2 weeks ago when the governor gave her a stay-at-home order on November 13th.
Gotcha.
We are going to have one school possibly go back. I haven't made the decision, but one of our schools will be going back to that model next week. So far, that school has been pretty good about not getting any cases. So other than that, we are remote. We're encouraging people to stay home and try to make the best of the situation.
Got you. And so which school is the one that maybe is doing a little bit better than your other schools?
Right now, we're looking at letting the Judy Nelson in the Kirtland area go back into the hybrid model. That way they can continue that for a couple of weeks before we go on break.
Right, and that is, of course, the next big thing happening for schools around the state is the winter break, and so as your students are kind of wrapping up the semester, what are you learning, and what are you hearing from your principals at your schools across the district? And of course, Central Schools is a vast district in the northwest part of our state.
One of the concerns that I have, and it's across the board, I think it's across the state, is that there is a huge concern that I have is we haven't been able to see our students grades 6 through 12. On December 13th, it'll be 9 months, and if everybody kind of watches the calendar, 9 months is equivalent to a school year, and that'll mean that our students 6 through 12 have not seen any teacher in person for one school year, and I'm very concerned about them not being able to see their teachers. We're trying our best to get them the remote activities and have our teachers give them what they need. But, everybody knows the face-to-faces is a lot better. And so I have a lot of concern with that. We're trying through the Superintendent's Association, trying to make sure that they can allow us to at least have our schools go to the hybrid model 6 through 12. Really concerned about that. Parents are concerned about their kids not getting face-to-face. So it's just a difficult situation.
Right. Understood. And of course, you are dealing with that, as you mentioned. Your organization, the Superintendent's Association, is hearing that probably from throughout the state. And we were talking before we came on the air this morning briefly that but you get parents on both sides of the issue, right? Some are okay with remote and don't want their kids maybe in the schools to possibly get sick, and other parents want doors open and face-to-face learning right away, right?
Right. We have, it's understandable. And I think that people that understand what school districts go through, I think parents and community members understand that you have people that want their kids remote learning, so that way they can stay home and monitor their kids. And then you have other parents that want their kids face to face. And so we're trying to balance that out with parent choice, and thus the possibility of Judy Nelson going to that model next week for a couple of weeks before we go on break, and the rest remaining remote. It's just a hard balancing act to make sure that we accommodate all parents. And I know not everybody's happy with it, but we're just trying our best. It's just to say it politely, it's just an interesting situation. So.
Interesting is a great word to use, I think, in this situation, Mr. Benavidez, for sure. And I know you are taking your kind of direction from the Public Education Department, which takes their direction from really the governor's office. Isn't that kind of how it works?
Yeah, and then we also have the Navajo Nation that we have to consider,
Of course.
because the majority of our district is on Navajo Nation, and we try to use the government to government to relay messages through to them. And again, it's a balancing act, and I hope people understand how difficult it is to balance that. But that's what we're here for. Is the board is very supportive of their community and trying to listen to what the constituency wants in their particular area. So we're juggling that, and more than anything, if I were king for a day, I would hope that the governor and the PD understands that. Again, I want to emphasize that we haven't seen our kids 6 through 12 in almost a school year, and it's going to be longer than that if they don't lift that in some way. We need to see our kids. We have kids that need the services, need that face-to-face, and everybody complains about New Mexico last and New Mexico this and New Mexico that, but there's got to be some kind of compromise to be able to do that. I think that our parents are strong enough and determined enough to allow for their kids to be safe in the schools, and allow for the kids to be in the hybrid model. So again, that's my major concern right now. Is I keep thinking about that. Complete school year without face-to-face instructions is alarming for me.
Sure. Well, of course, and you've had a long history in education, of course, and so you know how much this can impact students, and you're probably seeing it. I think we're hearing more about it. And you mentioned the Navajo Nation. I just wanted to point out, of course, as New Mexico was in a 2-week kind of lockdown reset, the governor said, yeah. The Navajo Nation was in a 3-week lockdown, which actually it still is until I think this week, right? Right.
It ends on December 6th.
Right. And so that would impact maybe your schools and your abilities to do some of the things you'd like to do as well, correct? Of what the tribal government is saying and wanting to do?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that it's idealistically it's one thing to say that we want our kids to be in the remote learning atmosphere, but then we have issues with electricity, as I mentioned in the last interview. We have issues with internet, that those kids don't have those things on at their houses. And so when people are requesting to go remote, or government entities are requesting the district do this type of learning environment, they've also got to realize that the infrastructure isn't there for some of those parents. So those parents, we've had parents come to us and say, you know what, we don't want our kids in school. We really don't. We don't feel that that's a safe environment for them, but we need them to come to school because they need to. We don't have any choice, and so they've made that decision. Now that was when we did have the schools on the Navajo Nation in that hybrid model. So
right.
It's one of those things where parents don't want their kids to come to school, but they have no choice but to have their kids come to school in that model because they don't have those services like internet and electricity.
And that maybe impacts your district more than some of the others in our state because of just the remoteness of your families and your schools. And I know Central Consolidated has spent, I'm sure it's probably millions of dollars to get internet to some of your school buildings so that kids can be connected when they're in the building. But if they can't get to the building, that's a whole different story.
Right. I think Central Consolidated is a good example of what the state of New Mexico is. We have rural remote. We have some communities that are next to a city that have accessibility. So we kind of mirror what the state of New Mexico looks like in general. And so that is very hard. We have spent millions of dollars to upgrade our bandwidth, and we're trying to implement that as we speak, just so we can expand our Wi-Fi for those parking lots for people to drive up and be able to have that access. But again, I was thinking about this yesterday and listening to some of the superintendents and some of the other people that I've talked to in the last couple of days, and it really becomes an issue of have and have nots. I mean, parents that have the ability to be in a situation where they can offer internet and those type of things for their kids is a great thing. That's wonderful. But then there's parents that don't have that ability, and it becomes more of a gap. And that's concerning to me because, there are also parents that have taken their kids out of public schools, not necessarily out of CCSD, but I'm guessing that there are some that have sent their kids to private school because private school doesn't have to follow the rules in some ways like public schools. And so you have those gaps where you have people that have the ability to educate their kids in a different way, and you have parents that don't have that ability, that rely on public schools to be able to educate their kids. And again, we're increasing that gap with the haves and the have-nots.
Right, and that's got to be a concern for any educator, I would think. And of course,
absolutely,
you are, and all other superintendents at public school districts in our state are charged with educating every kid, whether they have internet or don't have internet. Whether I've got a computer or I don't have a computer, right? You are charged with educating those students, whoever walks through your door.
Right, we have a constitutional obligation to teach our kids, to get our kids educated. And I got to give kudos to all the superintendents in the state and their staffs and their school districts, because they're trying their best. And I don't think people realize that there is a lot of different things. I mean, most of the things that we would normally be doing right now in December in a normal year, we're not doing. We're concentrating on COVID, and that's extremely difficult for some people to recognize. And then on the other hand, we want people to be safe, and we want people to keep together and stay in small groups. But then you go out and you see people just not wearing masks and people doing the opposite of what could be helping us. And it really is just, I want kids in class. Bottom line, we want our kids in class, and we need people to help us out with that. And the more they can keep those masks on and just stay isolated, it's a little bit of discipline. It really is just discipline, staying to yourself. We can get through this, but we ask that people be disciplined and try to maintain safety. So. Indeed.
And I know you were talking to me earlier too, Mr. Benavidez, about athletics, and the NMAA, of course, is meeting, I think you told me later today, to maybe talk about what athletics are going to look like. Of course, most things have been kind of pushed into the spring with the hopes that things will be better, but I don't know how that looks nowadays. But what are you feeling about this meeting today, and what are your thoughts? I know, again, just like kids need to maybe be in the classroom, I know there's a lot of students that want to get on those playing fields or on those stages and concerts and drama and things like that to be able to do some of the other things that make school so important for students.
Yeah, I think it's again, that's a concern for me too, because a lot of kids come to school, whether we like to admit it or not, we have kids that come to school to participate in activities and be social, and then they get they get to diplomas and they move on. And athletics and activities are really important in their lives, and they're not able to access that. And so that is a huge concern. I don't think anything is going to come out of it because the governor hasn't said anything today. I think the NMA is going to try to hopefully, make sure that they let the governor and the state know that we want athletics in an environment. And here's the part that's ironic. I'm a big sports fan, and I apologize for those Aggie fans in the state, but I am a Lobo, so everybody's a Lobo. But even though they haven't won a game, I look at something that's really interesting. They've taken the football team out of state as an example. They haven't won a game, but they're spending $300,000 in a bubble in Las Vegas so they can play. Now they're going to profit because of their TV contracts, so they're going to make some money off of it, just like most athletics in the collegiate arena. But they could have been doing that here in the state. That money could have been used in the state of New Mexico, and they could have been isolated. I mean, they could have reserved the Tamaya, for example, and isolated them. And I say that for this reason: if there are guidelines and enough money put into that, and they're testing people, to make sure that they're watching who they interact with and those type of things, then I think we could do that. I think that if we put our there's a lot of smart people in the state of New Mexico and a lot of science that can be used to help our kids navigate through that, because there's a lot of social emotional that goes on with being athletics, being in classrooms, being social, those type of things that are important to their lives. And I really think that if there was a group of people that could come together and do something like that, I know it costs money, but there's other places that we're not using that money, we could actually have those type of activities or those type of environments for our kids. and they have no cases. The UNM football team has no cases for COVID because it's a controlled environment. And I really think that if you put some guidelines and you were really stringent on what you wanted to do with it, you could do something along those lines. And that's just, I mean, my 2 cents. It doesn't mean much, but I think there's enough smart people that help us with our students to learn, to be part of the activities and athletics, and be social. It's hard enough to be a kid nowadays, but then you add COVID and isolation, it multiplies that by 100-fold. So
there are certainly a lot of challenges and maybe a lot of opportunities for some of this out of the box thinking, as you suggest.
Right. We have some creative teachers out there, and we have some creative principals that are just doing some phenomenal jobs with their students. But I do want to plug that, parents, we need your students to come back to school. It's across the state, and I'm putting a plug for all districts that, parents, we need you to register your kids in school, whether you're in Bloomfield, Aztec, Central Consolidated, Farmington, all districts. There are kids that we can't account for because we don't know where they're at. And maybe some of them have left the state because of athletics and the face-to-face. That's unfortunate, but we do know that there are some kids that we can't get a hold of, and that applies to district all across the state. And so we want parents to give the opportunity to the public schools, and if they're homeschooling, they need to register their kids with their districts because we get credit for that at the state level. So parents, please help us out with our kids. If you don't want your kids in school and you're going homeschool, please at least register with your districts that way, and give our districts a chance. I'll give all our districts a chance to educate our kids in this time of pandemic.
Very true. And Mr. Benavidez, I wanted to ask you too a little bit about some of the support that the district is able to offer, both your students and I think your teachers, your staff, because it's such a stressful year, and some folks may be having difficulties with this new online environment and switching back and forth from hybrid to all online and maybe back to some face-to-face. The district has some resources or is able to share resources with parents if children are struggling, or staff or teachers and things like that. I think I noticed a brochure on your
Yes.
Facebook page to offer that, at least to your employees, but I assume you've got resources for your parents and students too.
Thanks for bringing that up, Scott. We, with our students, we have counselors that are available. They can call, they can reach out to their school sites. Each one of the school sites has counselors. We have some social workers in the district that can help out. We put that brochure, as you mentioned, on Facebook. We have some links for our students and for our parents. And quite frankly, I think a lot of even adults are getting fatigued with being on Zoom and GoToMeeting and Teams and those type of things. So please reach out to us. Reach out to your districts. We have several districts in this area. And I know that all districts have some kind of program that they can help out. And as it's what's being shown, we have those contacts. And if you can't get a hold of anybody, send me an email. I'll point you in the right direction. We'll get you some help. But it's tough. There's no need to be alone. We can get you some help.
Very good. Good point, and I appreciate you having those resources available for anyone really that's in need, that's
Right.
dealing with the Central School District for sure. I want to change focus just a little bit and talk about spring and the spring semester and maybe January. We have a winter break coming up, as we've talked about, and so as things come back, of course, there's talk about a vaccine, which we're all very excited about and hopeful about as that gets rolled out. But what are your thoughts to tell parents and students for January when they come back from break? Any predictions?
Well, I don't want to sound like the town crier or Chicken Little or anything like that, but
Okay. But you're realistic.
I'm being realistic, and that's who I am. Back in March, before I came to Central, I mentioned to my staff down south that there's a possibility that we may not be able to come back to school in January. And I mentioned that in July when I first got here. And here we are a month away from January. On Monday, when we had our superintendent's meeting, there was one of the superintendents brought up the fact that there was an article or a news clip out of Albuquerque, I think it was KOB, that mentioned that because of what happened with Thanksgiving, with people going out there and
people visiting with family or large groups, right?
Right,
That's the concern.
large gatherings, right? That for us to go back to green, it would take 30 weeks of this type of environment. And so if you take the 30 weeks, that puts us in March. And again, I don't mean to be sound like Chicken Little, but the reality is that the more we try to be normal and do those type of things without taking precautions, the longer it's going to take. And I do worry. I'm really glad that there's several companies out there that show a vaccine that's promising. But my concern is that I've heard people, say, well, the vaccine's coming, I'm not worried about it anymore. I'm just going to do what I have to do. And if I get it, I get it. And I think that's cavalier. I think that's the wrong attitude to have. I think until we have it and it's established, we have to be cautious. And even after we get the vaccine, there are still things that I'm sure that they're going to have in place so we don't exacerbate the problem even more. So it's a concern. I just have this sneaky suspicion that we may be remote for quite a while. And I don't want to put a time frame on it, but I'll say quite a while. And that's a concern for me. It really is.
Well, yeah, and it's a concern for a lot of folks, I understand. But I guess maybe what you're saying, too, is that we should get used to this type of learning environment, and if parents were maybe thinking about making some changes to help their students, if they know that this is going to be the case for the next several weeks in January, February, March, who knows, maybe make that investment, maybe buy that computer or whatever needs to be done to maybe help their students in the new semester in the spring, right?
Right, and then we're going to take a look at it. We've taken some preemptive measures to make sure that we have the ability to open in the hybrid model in case something changes. And we did that because under the guidelines, it allows us that if we're preemptive on the COVID cases within a building site, and we do it beforehand, we still have the option to go back to that. So I don't want to take that off the table at all, because if our cases go down and in a particular school site, we will, and the parents want that, we will allow those parents that want that choice to go back. We've made it very clear to our community that it's a parent choice. We're not forcing anybody to go back. We're not even in the schools that were in the hybrid model. They weren't even at capacity at even 25%. Those parents chose to send their kids to school, and then there's parents that chose to keep their kids in school. So I want to make that clear. It's a parent choice. The board and the district is not forcing anybody to go back, but we do have that option if it's available, if our cases go down. So I just want to give some hope there.
Sure.
And, if there's the opportunity for us to go back and the governor tells us that hopefully she'll change her mind and allow for some 6 through 12 instruction face-to-face in the hybrid model, I would greatly appreciate it. I know some other superintendents would really appreciate that, and parents would too. So
indeed,
that's the hope. There is always hope.
Of course. Well, and that's important. But I think it's good to note that what you're telling us is that your schools do have capacity, even if they're not open at 100% or even 50%, but you could add more students when it's allowed to come back for face-to-face at your buildings.
Absolutely.
And that's good to know. And that's an important thing. So very good. Well, Mr. Benavidez, we just have a couple of minutes remaining this morning, and I wanted to ask you again a little bit about coming back to school. Is there anything over the winter break that parents can be doing with their students to try to keep them engaged or try to stay positive? And as you mentioned, it's a challenging year. I'm sure it's very hard for your teachers to stay positive, and yourself and your students and your parents too. But for the good of the students, I think we all want to be positive for these students who are dealing with these challenging situations.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Scott. I think that parents over the break, I think that they need to spend some time and go back to, not that they haven't been doing that, but I think that the parents need to really, emphasize where they're at, talk to their kids and see how they're doing, and spend some quality time, not just superficial, hey, how are you doing? Kind of have some conversations with them. How are they doing in class? How do they like the remote? What kind of resources do they need? And I know it sounds cheesy. I know it's hard for kids to relate to their parents and vice versa, but we were all kids once, then now that we're adults, and think about how you wanted your parents to relate to you. It's simple questions, and work with them. If you have an opportunity to, and it's not too cold, I would recommend that parents take the time to get outside and take a walk with your kids, even if it's down the street. You'd be surprised on how that sparks a conversation. But I would hope that parents spend some time with them if they have the ability to, and ask them questions, see how they're doing in school. Really ask them how they're doing in school. Talk to their teachers, see what they can do with their teachers, and get a hold of their site principals and their teachers, and see what they can do over the break. There's a lot of little things that can be done. It's already hard being remote, but let the experts, the teachers, help you out. Talk to them and see what they can do. But again, more than anything, Scott, I think that parents just need to take some one-on-one time and be genuine and talk to their kids and use the FaceTime, use the technology if they have it. Reach out to the family members that are away and do a face-to-face once a week or once a night. And I know it's different, but you know what? It helps. Leave it open and watch a movie together. Think outside the box and watch a movie together on Zoom or something like that. So
watching a movie on FaceTime. That could be the new.
Yeah, on FaceTime, right.
I got you.
Just trying to make some popcorn and and eat together and do those simple type of things. That's really all I can suggest. And stay safe, and try to follow the rules. It's very hard. It's hard to stay disciplined, but I think that's the only advice I can really give.
Well, I think it's good advice, Mr. Benavidez, and we're all in this together, as we've heard from time to time, and it's still true. Even here we are at the end of almost the end of 2020. So I appreciate your time being with me this morning, and we'll speak again in January, I hope, and I hope that you and your family have a safe holiday season as well.
Likewise, Scott. Thanks for having me. Anytime you want to have me on here, hopefully I'm not boring.
Not at all. You're very gracious with your time, and I appreciate it. So we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Have a good day. Be safe.
All right. You as well. Thank you very much. That is Daniel Benavidez. He is the superintendent of schools with the Central Consolidated School District here in Northwest New Mexico, my guest on KSJE. And I'll be back with more in just a moment this morning, everyone. The time coming up right now is 8:40 a.m. Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.